Where the river begins. There are nights when the forest seems to be holding its breath, not because it is afraid, not because something waits among the trees, but because every leaf, every branch, and every small creature beneath the ferns has chosen, for a little while, to be still. This was such a night in Shadowfen. Behind me, the serpent's coil had settled once more into silence. Its dark water moved beneath the twin moons, carrying broken reeds and pale reflections away into the marsh. Whisperwind rested beside my hand. The silver runes along its blade had dimmed to a peaceful glow, as though the old sword, too, had grown tired of struggle. Before me flowed another river. It was narrower than the serpent's coil and gentler than any stream I had seen in the marsh. Tiny points of light drifted over its surface. They gathered in the current, separated around stones, and joined again beyond them. From far upstream came a sound so quiet I might have imagined it, one clear chime, followed by another, with all the patient space of the night between. Lumenara. The river had whispered its name beneath my fingers. It was the path described by the old parchment, the tributary that sang with starlight. Somewhere beyond its silver bends waited the Amulet of Lumina, the fallen star relic that might restore the great elder tree and return magic to my fading people. For many days I had believed hope must feel like fired. I had imagined it as something bright and fierce, something that demanded I keep walking no matter how deeply the marsh cut me, no matter how loudly fear spoke in the council's borrowed voice. But beside Lumenara, hope did not feel like fire. It felt like cool water moving around my fingertips. It felt like moss beneath my knees. It felt like a quiet road appearing only when I had become still enough to see it. I washed the mud from my hands. I wrapped my wounded side with a clean strip of linen from my satchel. Then I sat beneath the drooping branches of a willow and watched the starlight travel downstream. There would be time enough to follow it. For now, the river had found me, and for the first time since leaving Silverwood, I allowed myself to rest. When I opened my eyes, the twin moons had moved only a little. Shadowfen knew no true morning. Beneath its roof of twisted branches, time passed in shades of blue and gray. Yet Lumenara carried its own kind of dawn. The points of light in the current grew brighter, then softened, then brightened again, slowly breathing beneath the water. I listened until my breathing matched them. Brighten, soften, brighten, soften. The ache in my side remained, but its sharp edge had faded. I placed one hand against the bandage and whispered the oldest healing words I knew. The magic that answered was small, no more than warmth resting beneath my palm, but I did not ask it to be more. Small things had carried me this far, one fading rune, one scrap of parchment, one thread of moonlight along Whisperwind's edge. Perhaps small magic was not failed magic. Perhaps it was simply magic that had learned to speak softly. I stood, fastened the parchment inside my satchel, and sheathed Whisperwind. The river bent north beneath a curtain of willow leaves. There was no road along its bank, yet when I stepped forward, the moss seemed firm beneath my boots. Roots that might have caught my feet curved gently aside. Brambles leaned away from my armor. A line of blue mushrooms opened their tiny caps one after another, marking the way. Lumenara did not hurry. It widened around fallen trees and narrowed between old stones. It paused in quiet pools where pale fish floated as motionless as leaves. Then it gathered itself and moved on. I followed in the same way. Where the ground was level, I walked. Where it was steep, I rested. Where the river became difficult to hear, I stopped until its distant chime returned. There had been no gentleness in my journey through the deeper marsh. Every sound there had demanded an answer. Every shadow had seemed to contain a warning. Yet along the starlit river, the forest asked nothing of me except attention. A night bird called once from somewhere high in the canopy. Its note fell through the branches and touched the water. Farther on, another bird answered with the same single note. Call and answer. Question and rest. The pattern followed me for a long while. I began to notice details the fear inside me had hidden before. Silver threads of web stretched between the reeds, each holding a row of perfect droplets. Ferns uncurled at the river's edge, their new leaves luminous and soft. Tiny moths slept beneath broad mushroom caps, wings folded like scraps of moonlit parchment. When a breeze passed, it carried the clean scent of rain instead of the old decay of Shadowfen. I wondered whether Lumenara had always been here, clear and quiet beneath the marsh's darkness. Perhaps it had flowed unnoticed through every terrible night, keeping a small memory of the world before corruption. Perhaps the land had not forgotten how to heal. It had only hidden the knowledge where cruel hands could not reach it. The thought comforted me. In Silverwood, the great elder tree stood at the center of our city. Its roots passed beneath every home and garden. When I was a child, they hummed under the stone floors, and sometimes, just before sleep, I would place my ear against the cool tiles and listen. My mother told me the sound was the tree remembering rain. I had not heard it in many years. The last time I knelt beside one of those roots, there had been only silence. I had carried that silence with me into Shadowfen. I had treated it like a command. Hurry, Lyra, fight harder, do not stop, do not fail. But Lumenara offered a different lesson. The river did not become lost when it slowed. It did not fail when it rested in a pool. It remained a river in every quiet place. As the bank curved west, I found a flat stone warmed by a pale beam of moonlight. I sat and took a little bread from my satchel. It was dry at the edges, so I dipped it into the water. The river left a faint sparkle on the crust, and for one cautious moment I waited, expecting some strange enchantment. Nothing happened. It was simply bread softened by clean water. I laughed then, very quietly. The sound surprised me. It had been so long since laughter came without effort that I barely recognized my own. Yet it belonged there among the reeds, no louder than the night bird and no more important than the whisper of current over stone. I ate slowly. I drank. I watched 2 silver fish draw circles in the pool below me. When I rose again, the path of mushrooms continued around the bend. So did I. The farther I followed Lumenara, the less Shadowfen resembled the marsh I knew. The skeletal trees gave way to willows with living green branches. The black mud became dark, rich soil. Even the mist changed. It no longer clung to my legs like cold fingers. It floated in long ribbons over the water and glowed wherever the river's light touched it. Near a stand of white reeds, the path ended. Before me, the water widened into a deep pool, too broad to cross and bordered on both sides by steep walls of root and stone. The parchment showed no bridge. Its faded lines met at the river and continued on the other side, as though the map-maker had assumed the water itself would carry any traveler worthy of finding it. I stood at the edge and listened. One chime sounded upstream, then another. At the base of the reeds, something shifted. I reached for Whisperwind, but my hand stopped before touching the hilt. The movement was too gentle for danger. Stalks bent one by one, not breaking but weaving together. Long leaves folded across them. Silver roots rose from the mud and bound the frame with patient, careful knots. In a few moments, a small boat rested at the shore. It was no grand elven vessel. It had no carved prow, no sail, and no polished rail. It was only a shallow cradle of reeds, wide enough for one traveler and her sword. I placed one hand against its sides. The reeds were warm. "Thank you," I whispered, though I did not know whether I spoke to the river, the marsh, or the forgotten magic sleeping inside them both. The boat rocked gently as I stepped in. There was no paddle. When I sat, the current drew me away from the bank. Lumenara carried me beneath the willows. Their branches formed a low green ceiling overhead. Leaves brushed the surface and trailed thin lines through the reflected stars. I rested my hands in my lap and let the boat turn as it wished. At first, surrendering the path felt strange. I was used to choosing every foothold, testing every patch of ground, watching every shadow. In the council chamber, I had stood alone before 7 elders and defended every step of a journey I had not yet begun. In Shadowfen, hesitation could mean claws, venom, or deep water closing overhead, but no danger came. The boat drifted. The river breathed. The reeds creaked softly beneath me. I loosened the strap across my shoulder. I let my head rest against the woven side. Above, the twin moons appeared and disappeared between the branches, one large and pearly, the other small and blue. My mother had named them for me when I was very young. The elder moon was Saren, keeper of memory. The younger was Ael, keeper of dreams. In the oldest songs, Saren watched over all that had been, while Ael guarded all that might yet be in. Between them lay the present, silver and narrow as a path across dark water. "Walk between memory and dream," my mother used to tell me. "Do not let one steal you from the other." As a child, I had thought it only a beautiful phrase. Now I understood how easily memory could become grief, and how easily a dream could become fear of losing it. I had remembered Silverwood so fiercely that its fading filled every waking thought. I had dreamed of saving it so desperately that rest felt like betrayal. But here I was, held between the 2 moons, moving without effort toward something I could not yet see. The river passed through a corridor of tall grass. Seed heads leaned over the boat and released pale, drifting threads. They caught in my braid and on the silver edges of my armor. I brushed one from my glove, then decided to leave the rest. They made me look, I imagined, less like a warrior princess and more like a hedge that had learned to carry a sword. Again, the quiet laugh came. This time it stayed a little longer. I thought of Tavin, the youngest gardener in the courtyard of the great elder tree. He had been born after the magic began to fade. He could not call blossoms from a branch as elven children once had, yet he spoke to every seed before planting it. He said the seeds listened even if they could not answer. Before I left Silverwood, he had pressed 3 moonflower seeds into my hand. For the road, he had said. I carried them now in a small fold of cloth inside my satchel. I had imagined planting them only when I returned, perhaps beneath a restored elder tree. But as the reed boat drifted past a small island of soft black earth, I felt the seeds stir against the fabric. The current slowed. I leaned over the boat and pressed one seed into the island's soil. For the road, I said. The river carried me on before I could see whether it would grow. That was all right. Not every hope needed to bloom while I watched. The willows thinned. Ahead, a warm amber light shone between the trees, gentle and steady, unlike the cold glow of the river. The boat turned toward it. On a bank surrounded by white reeds stood a little house with a curved roof, round windows, and a chimney made of smooth river stones. Golden light rested behind its curtains. A wooden landing reached into the water, and tied beside it was another reed boat, old and silvered with age. Someone had followed Lumenara before me. Someone perhaps still lived beside it. My boat touched the landing with the smallest of sounds. The door of the house opened, and a calm voice said, "You have taken your time, Lyra of Silverwood." There was no accusation in the words, only welcome. The figure in the doorway was an elf, though not one of Silverwood. She was tall and thin, wrapped in layers of gray-blue cloth. Her hair, white as willow down, fell loose around her shoulders. Age had drawn fine lines beside her eyes, but those eyes were clear and dark, reflecting the river as perfectly as still pools. She carried no weapon. In one hand she held a small clay lamp. "You know my name," I said. "Lumenara knows your name," she replied. "For tonight, that is enough." She stepped aside and lifted the lamp a little higher. "Come in. You are tired." Every lesson from my training advised caution. A hidden house in an enchanted marsh should not be entered simply because its doorway was warm and its keeper kind. Yet Whisperwind remained quiet at my side. The runes did not warn me. The river moved peacefully beneath the landing, and I was tired. I crossed the threshold. The house contained a single round room. Bundles of herbs hung from the rafters. Shelves curved along the walls, holding clay jars, folded blankets, river stones, and small glass bottles filled with different shades of moonlight. A fire glowed in a low hearth, though there was no smoke. Beside it stood a kettle, already singing under its breath. The keeper pointed to a cushioned chair. "Armor first," she said. I hesitated. "You may keep the sword." There was humor in her voice, but no mockeries. I unfastened the silver pauldrons and set them beside the chair. Without their weight, my shoulders seemed to rise. I removed my gloves, then the leather guard around my wounded side. The linen beneath was stained, but the bleeding had stopped. The keeper knelt beside me and held her hand near the bandage. "Marshfang," she said. "Yes." "And River Serpent." "Yes." She looked up at me. "You have been making a great deal of noise in a place that values silence." I could not tell whether she teased me, so I answered honestly. "They tried to kill me." "Then I am glad you were louder." She unwound the bandage with careful fingers. The wound was angry and dark along one edge. She washed it with warm water that smelled of cedar and mint, then laid 3 long leaves across it. Coolness spread through my side. "This will not mend in a single night," she said. "Few important things do. But it will remember how to close." The phrase caught my attention. Remember? The keeper tied a clean bandage. Healing is often a kind of remembering. Skin remembers wholeness. A river remembers the sea. A seed remembers the shape of its flower. She rose and crossed to the kettle. "And a people?" I asked. She poured steaming water over herbs in 2 shallow cups. "A people can remember too," she said, "though they sometimes need help." She placed 1 cup in my hands. The tea tasted of mint, rain, and something faintly sweet. "Who are you?" I asked. "My name is Ellerin. I keep this bend of the river." "How long have you lived here?" She considered the question while adding a small piece of wood to the fire. Long enough to stop counting, not long enough to stop listening. I drew the parchment from my satchel and unfolded it across my knees. In the warm room, the old ink brightened. The line of the serpent's coil ended at a starburst symbol. From it, a narrow silver stroke followed Lumenara north toward a cluster of towers. Dawnspire, Ellerin said. The name had appeared in fragments of very old maps in the Royal Archive, always at the edge of damaged pages. Some scholars believed it had been a watchtower, others called it a temple. The council dismissed it as a tale left over from the years when our ancestors gave names to every hill and dreamed a city beneath every ruin. "Is the amulet there?" I asked. Ellerin did not answer at once. She sat across from me and warmed both hands around her cup. "What do you believe the Amulet of Lumina to be?" "A relic forged from a fallen star. It can rejuvenate any living thing. That is what the songs say. It is why I came. That is why the river allowed you to come." Her answer opened more questions than it closed, and I felt the old urgency return. I leaned forward. "My people are fading. The great elder tree is dying. If the amulet is at Dawnspire, I cannot wait here." "You can." Her voice remained kind. "You do not want to," she continued, "but you can." The fire settled. Somewhere above us, rain began to tap against the curved roof. One drop, then another, then many, joined in a soft and even pattern. Ellerin waited while I listened. "Dawnspire will still be there after you drink your tea," she said. "The amulet has waited centuries. It can wait until your hands stop trembling." I looked down. The surface of the tea shook against the rim of my cup. I had not noticed, so I sat back. I drank. I listened to the rain. After a while, Ellerin asked about Silverwood, not its danger, not its counsel, not even the great elder tree, but the small things. She asked what grew beneath my window. "Moontime," I told her, "and white bellflowers in the cool season." She asked which bakery opened first. "Merrill's, beside the eastern stair. He burns the first loaf every morning and calls it an offering to the dawn." She asked what children did when rain filled the lower courtyards. "They fold bark boats and race them through the drains." As I answered, Silverwood changed inside my thoughts. It was no longer only a dying tree, dim eyes and silent roots. It became time beneath my window. Warm bread near the eastern stairs. Children kneeling in rainwater, cheering for little boats. It became a home rather than a burden. Perhaps Ellerin saw the change in my face. "That is what you are walking toward," she said softly. "Remember it when Dawnspire shows you what you fear." "What will it show me?" "Only what you carry." The answer should have troubled me. Instead, held by the firelight and the steady rain, I found that I could let it remain unanswered. Ellerin brought a blanket woven in blue and green. She placed it over my shoulders and pointed to a narrow bed beneath the round window. "Sleep, Lyra of Silverwood. Lumenara knows where you are going." I lay down without removing Whisperwind from my reach. Old habits, even in safety, have patient roots. The river shone beyond the glass. The rain continued its quiet counting. And before I could count even 10 drops, the warm room drifted away. I dreamed of the great elder tree. In the dream, it was neither living nor dead. It stood beneath a sky filled with slow-moving stars. Half its branches were bare, while the other half held leaves of green, silver, and gold. Beneath it sat all the people of Silverwood. No one spoke. They rested against the roots as though listening for something far below. I approached the trunk and placed my palm against the bark. At first, there was nothing. Then, very faintly, I felt 3 beats. Not a command, not a warning. A heart, resting between one moment and the next. When I woke, the rain had stopped. The little house was filled with blue river light. My armor had been cleaned and laid beside the hearth. My green gloves were dry. A fresh loaf waited on the table with a small jar of honey. Ellerin stood outside among the reeds. I joined her after eating. The air had the cool, washed scent that comes after rain. Drops hung from every willow leaf, reflecting 2 tiny moons. "Did you dream," she asked, "of my home?" "Good. It did not feel good. The dreams we need rarely arrive wearing the shape we prefer." She handed me my silver pauldron. "But they leave gifts." I fastened it and felt, beneath my concern, a stillness that had not been there before. "What happens now?" "Now we walk through the garden." Behind her house, a narrow path entered a wall of dark leaves. We followed it. The garden beyond was larger than the whole river bend should have allowed. Terraces climbed a gentle hillside beneath the twin moons. Pale flowers opened in waves as we passed. Some were small as stars, others were broad enough to hold pools of rainwater in their petals. No bees moved among them. Instead, white moths carried silver dust from bloom to bloom. Their wings made a sound like pages turning in a distant room. Every traveler who reaches Lumenara plants something here, Alarin said. She showed me a row of herbs planted by a healer from the southern plains, a cedar grown from a northern seed, and a twisting vine whose blue fruit held the scent of an ocean I had never seen. How many travelers have there been? Fewer than the plants. Some bring more than one seed. Some seeds plant themselves. We came to an empty patch of earth bordered by white stones. I thought of the moonflower seeds in my satchel. 2 remained. 1 for the road, I said, remembering Tavin. I knelt and pressed a seed into the soil. Alarin knelt beside me. And the other? For home. Then keep it close. I covered the seed and poured a little water from her clay cup onto the earth. Nothing happened. I waited. Still nothing. Alarin smiled. You have spent too much time among enchanted objects. I thought, I know. She pressed one finger into the damp soil. This is enchanted. It is doing exactly what a seed must do, in darkness where you cannot watch. We continued up the hill. Near the top grew a circle of silver grass. In its center stood a stone basin. Water filled it to the rim, perfectly still despite the breeze. Look, Alarin said. I leaned over. The basin did not reflect my face. I saw the council chamber on the night I left. The 7 elders sat beneath the carved roots of the royal hall. Their robes were gray, their eyes were tired. I heard Elder Valor call my quest a suicide mission. I saw myself standing alone before them, one hand on Whisperwind, anger bright in my chest. The memory was so clear I could smell the cold wax of the chamber candles. Why show me this? I asked. The basin shows nothing, Alarin replied. It reflects. You brought the memory. In the water, my remembered self turned away from the council. I had carried the elders' doubt through every mile of Shadowfen. Whenever I weakened, I heard their voices. Whenever I was afraid, I became angry at them for having predicted it. I had told myself that anger made me strong. Perhaps it had for a while, but strength was not the same as peace. I placed both hands around the cool rim. They surrendered before the journey began, I said. Yes, they would have let the elder tree die. Perhaps. I cannot forgive that. Alarin stood beside me without speaking. The water continued to hold the chamber, the gray robes, the tired faces. Then I noticed something I had not seen that night. Elder Valor's hands were closed around a little wooden bird. It had belonged to his daughter Elise, who disappeared in Shadowfen many years before I was born. He had carried it into the chamber. He had held it while warning me not to go. His fear had sounded like contempt, but fear often borrowed other voices. I did not agree with him. I did not excuse the council's surrender. Yet as I watched his fingers close around that small wooden bird, the anger inside me loosened. Only a little. It was enough. The image faded. My own face returned to the basin, pale beneath the moons, tired but calm. Alarin touched the water. Ripples crossed my reflection. Dawnspire has many mirrors, she said. Remember that a reflection is not a prison. The surface changes when you touch it. At the far edge of the garden stood an arch overgrown with night-blooming vines. Beyond it, stone steps descended to Lumenara. A narrow boat waited below, longer and stronger than the one that had carried me to Alarin's house. My armor felt lighter when I put it on. My wound felt cooler beneath its clean bandage. Alarin gave me a small clay lamp, though no flame burned inside. It will brighten when you remember something with love instead of fear, she said. Will I see you again? The river bends, she replied. Many things that seem to part are only traveling toward another meeting. I stepped into the boat. Alarin untied the rope. The current caught the woven hull. As the garden moved away, I saw a small pale shoot rise from the earth where I had planted the moonflower seed. I looked at Alarin. She lifted both hands as if to say she had done nothing. Perhaps she had not. Perhaps the seed had simply decided it was timed. The boat carried me beyond Alarin's garden and into a country of tall, straight trees. Their trunks were pale beneath the moons. Their leaves grew high overhead, leaving the river open to the sky. With no branches to break the reflection, Saren and Ale traveled beside me on the water. One moon of memory, one moon of dreams. Between them, stars gathered in Lumenara's current. The farther north I drifted, the more clearly I heard the chimes. They did not form a melody. One sounded nearby, deep and warm. Another answered from the hills, thin as the rim of a glass. Sometimes many quiet notes passed through the ground together, and the trees seemed to listen with me. At the beginning of my journey, I would have searched for danger in the sound. I would have counted the spaces between notes and tried to decide whether they were signals. Now I let them be bells. I rested against the woven reeds and watched the banks pass. A family of small deer drank from a pool beneath the birches. Their coats were dark, but each carried a white mark above the eyes like a fleck of snow. They raised their heads as my boat approached. For a moment, all four watched me. Then the smallest returned to the water. The others followed. I passed without disturbing them. Beyond the deer, low hills rose from the forest floor. Round doors had once been built into them. Most were closed behind roots and moss, but one remained open. Inside, shelves held rows of empty jars. A wooden chair waited beside a cold hearth. Wild thyme grew across the floor. Whoever lived there had gone long ago. Yet the place did not feel abandoned. It felt complete, as a nest feels complete after the birds have flown. I thought of all the lives that had unfolded along Lumenara before the river hid itself. Keepers, gardeners, boatmakers, and quiet watchers of the moons. They had left behind no statues of themselves and no carved records of their deeds. They had left paths, cups, seed beds, and a current clean enough to carry starlight. It seemed a gentle kind of greatness. The river narrowed. Stones rose from the water on both sides, smooth and gray. Ahead, an arch crossed from cliff to cliff. It was a bridge unlike any in Silverwood. No railing lined it, no tower guarded it. Along its underside hung hundreds of small bells, each made from a different material. There were bells of bronze, glass, shell, wood, silver, clay, and stone. Some were no larger than acorns. Others were broad as shields. No wind reached beneath the bridge, yet they moved gently as Lumenara passed below. Each bell gave one quiet note. The notes overlapped until the air seemed woven from sound. My boat slowed. At the center of the bridge, the river became perfectly still. The clay lamp Aileron had given me rested beside my knee. A faint blue glow appeared within it. I picked it up. As its light touched the bells, words emerged along the stone arch. The letters were old High Elven, weathered but clear. Only what is given may pass. I read the words twice. On the left bank stood a shallow stone bowl. It held a silver clasp, 3 copper coins, a carved bead, and a ring set with green glass, offerings from earlier travelers. I searched my satchel. I had few possessions: the parchment, the last moonflower seed, bandages, a flint, my small ration of bread, and the whetstone my brother had given me when I first learned to carry Whisperwind. The sword itself had belonged to my family for generations. My armor carried the crest of Silverwood. Everything seemed useful, important, or impossible to surrender. The boat waited. The bells whispered above me. I thought of placing a coin in the bowl, but I carried none. Shadowfen had little use for money. Then I understood. The words did not say that an object must be given. I closed my eyes. What had I kept too tightly? The answer came at once. I had carried a promise from the night I left Silverwood. I had made it alone beneath the twin moons, one hand on Whisperwind's hilt. I will return with the amulet, I had sworn. I will save everyone. I will not fail. It sounded brave, but beneath the bravery lay a cruel belief that all of Silverwood rested on my shoulders, and that if the elder tree died, every loss would belong to me. No one had asked me to carry that weight. I had taken it because fear feels more manageable when given the shape of duty. I stood carefully in the boat. I give the river the promise that I must do this alone, I said. My voice passed beneath the bridge. The bells fell silent. For one heartbeat, nothing moved. Then a little wooden bell sounded above my head. Another answered. One by one, all the bells joined, not loudly, but warmly, like rain beginning on leaves. The boat moved forward. The clay lamp brightened from blue to soft silver. I passed beneath the arch and felt something inside me ease. I was still Lyra. I was still daughter of the royal line, bearer of Whisperwind, and the one who had chosen to enter Shadowfen. But I was not the whole of Silverwood. I was one life moving among many, one voice in a song, one hand reaching toward a work that would require countless hands after mine. On the far side of the bridge, the river bent east. Above the trees, the first tower of Dawnspire appeared. It was slender and broken at the top, threaded with ivy, and lit from within by the pale glow of the moons. More towers rose behind it as the boat turned. Arches linked them across the hillside. Wide stairs descended toward the water. At the highest point stood a round dome of dark glass, reflecting a sky full of stars. The ruins were larger than the maps had ever suggested, and they were waiting in silence. Lumenara divided around a small island before reaching Dawnspire. On the island stood the remains of a gatehouse. 2 statues faced the river, both worn smooth by time. One held a branch, the other held an empty bowl. Moss covered their shoulders, and small white flowers grew from cracks in their stone robes. My boat came to rest between them. There was no landing, only 3 shallow steps beneath the water. I fastened the clay lamp to my belt, lifted my satchel, and stepped ashore. The boat did not drift away. It waited among the reeds as though it knew I would need it again. Beyond the gatehouse, a path of pale stones climbed toward the city. With every step, a line of faded runes brightened at my feet. The light traveled ahead of me, revealing courtyards, dry fountains, and long colonnades open to the night. Dawnspire had once been beautiful. It was beautiful still. Time had softened its edges. Trees grew through empty windows. Vines hung from balconies. The roof of one hall had fallen away, allowing stars to shine where chandeliers must once have burned. Yet the city did not carry the wounded silence of Silverwood. Its quiet was deep and settled. It had released what it had been. I followed the glowing path into a round courtyard. At its center stood a door of blue-black wood set into the hillside. Silver branches spread across its surface. At their center was an 8-pointed star, the same shape as the Amulet of Lumina shown in our oldest books. There was no handle. I placed my palm against the star. The door remained closed. I held the parchment near it. The ink shone, but no hidden words appeared. I drew Whisperwind and touched the flat of the blade to the silver branches. The runes along the sword gave one soft pulse, then dimmed. I tried moonlight, water from Lumenara, and the clay lamp. Nothing opened the door. The old impatience moved inside me. It suggested force. It showed me where the hinges might be weakest. It reminded me that the great elder tree did not have endless nights to wait while I solved ancient riddles. But Whisperwind had not been forged to break every closed thing. I sheathed it. Then I sat on the courtyard floor. The stone was cool beneath my hands. Somewhere in the ruins, water fell, one drop at a time. A moth crossed the courtyard, white wings bright against the dark door. I listened. There were the sounds of the city, leaves, water, distant bells, and wind passing through empty windows. Beneath them was something else, 3 low notes, repeating slowly. I had heard them in my dream beneath the great elder tree. I placed my hand over my heart. The same rhythm answered. 3 beats. Then rest. 3 beats. Then rest. The silver branches on the door were not reaching outward, they were bending inward, surrounding the star as limbs surround a nest. I remembered a song my mother sang when winter wind moved through the high rooms of the palace. It was older than the royal line, made from only a few notes. I had not sung it since childhood. At first my voice felt strange in the empty courtyard. The first note trembled, the second grew steadier. By the third, Dawnspire began to hum with me. I sang of roots beneath quiet earth. I sang of branches sleeping beneath snow. I sang of dawn resting inside the longest night. The words were simple. The melody rose and returned, never reaching for a grand ending. The star beneath my palm warmed. The silver branches unfolded. Without a scrape or groan, the door opened inward. Warm air touched my face. Beyond the threshold, a hallway curved gently downward. Lamps awakened along the walls, not with flame but with small floating points of amber light. Their glow revealed murals painted on blue stone. The first showed a star falling into a forest, the second showed elves gathered around a silver crater, the third showed a figure lifting a bright amulet from its center. I stepped in. The door remained open behind me. That small detail mattered more than I expected. Dawnspire did not trap me. It did not demand that I continue. I could turn back, return to Elloren's fire, and come again when I was stronger. Knowing I could leave made it easier to stay. I followed the amber lights. The murals continued. They showed the amulet carried from grove to grove. Wherever it passed, burned branches leafed again. Dry springs rose from stone. Fields bent beneath green grain. Yet in each image, the amulet's light grew a little dimmer. At last, it rested in the hands of a woman with braided hair and a crescent mark above one eye. Behind her gathered shadows without faces. The final mural had been damaged. A long, dark crack passed through it. I could make out only the woman turning toward Dawnspire, the amulet hidden against her chest. Below, a line of high elven remained. Selenai, last keeper of the fallen light. I knew the name. Every child of the royal line did. Selenai had been my ancestor, remembered in Silverwood as the princess who vanished during the first years of the Shadow. The oldest histories said dark forces stole the amulet and took her with it. But the mural showed her carrying it here, not captured, not defeated, protecting it. The discovery moved through me like the deep note of a bell. The story I had inherited was incomplete. Somewhere beneath Dawnspire, the rest of it waited. The hallway opened into a chamber filled with the sound of rainfall. At first, I thought a storm had begun above the ruins. Then I saw that the rain fell inside the room. Thousands of droplets descended from the dark ceiling. Each vanished just before touching the floor, leaving the stone perfectly dry. Shelves rose between the silver curtains of water. On them rested books, tablets, scroll cases, and crystal leaves etched with tiny script. Not one showed any sign of damp. I stepped beneath the falling drops. They passed through my hair and armor without wetting them. Yet every drop carried a whisper. Names, places, fragments of songs. The sound was too vast to understand. It filled the room like many generations speaking softly in their sleep. At the center stood a reading table. A single closed book waited upon it. Its cover bore the crest of Silverwood. I approached slowly. The crest was not the one used by my father or his father. Its branches curved differently, holding a star between them. I knew it from the oldest wall of the palace archive, Selenai's crest. The book opened when I touched it. No ink marked the first page. Instead, a drop of the impossible rain fell onto the paper and spread into a moving image. I saw Selenai standing beneath a red sky. She wore torn silver robes. The Amulet of Lumina hung at her throat, brilliant as a piece of dawn. Around her, trees bent beneath a wind filled with black ash. Her voice came from the page, distant but clear. If you have reached this room, then Lumenara has chosen to remember you. The image shifted. Selenai moved through Shadowfen as I had, though in her time the marsh was green and filled with birds. Behind her followed faceless shadows, long and thin beneath the trees. Wherever they passed, water darkened and roots curled inward. The Hollow Court did not desire the amulet's power to heal, she said. They desired the obedience that gratitude can create. They would wound the land, restore it, and demand its people kneel. On the page, Selenai reached Dawnspire. Keepers opened the gates. Together they carried the amulet below the city. We hid the fallen light, she continued, not because its gift had failed, but because we had misunderstood the gift. Lumina does not pour life into empty things. It awakens the life that remains. Used without listening, it takes from one root to feed another. Used with wisdom, it teaches the forest to remember itself. The page became blank. I waited. A second drop fell. Now Selenai sat in the same library, older and pale. The amulet no longer blazed. It rested in her hands with the gentle glow of an ember. I sent word to Silverwood, but the messenger never arrived. The shadow took the outer marsh. We closed Lumenara. We rang the bells once, then entered the long keeping. She looked toward me, or toward the traveler she had imagined across the centuries. If you came seeking a weapon against death, go no farther. There is no such weapon. If you came seeking command over life, leave this place and forget the river's name. Her expression softened. But if you came to listen, rest here. Dawnspire has waited a long while for a patient heart. The image faded. The rain continued whispering through the library. I closed my eyes. Had I come to listen? In Silverwood, I had imagined the amulet as a flood of power. I would carry it home, raise it before the great elder tree, and command the ancient branches to bloom. Magic would return to every child. The council would see that I had been right. The story would end in light. But Selenai had spoken of roots remembering themselves. That was slower, less certain. It would require more than one heroic act. It might require gardeners, healers, singers, children, doubting elders, and every patient hand in Silverwood. The promise I had released beneath the bridge returned to me in a new shape. I did not have to save everyone alone. Perhaps I could not. I turned the page. More drops fell, revealing records of the last keepers. They had diverted Lumenara beneath the marsh to preserve its clean water. They planted night gardens and taught the river to carry messages in its chimes. One by one, as the shadow closed around Dawnspire, they entered rooms beneath the city and joined their magic to its walls. Elleren's name appeared near the end. Keeper of the Western Bend. Guardian of rest and return. Beside it was a painted sprig of moonflower. I smiled. I still did not know whether Elleren was living, spirit, memory, or some quiet weaving of all three. The question no longer seemed urgent. She had given me shelter. Whatever name scholars might choose for her nature could not make that kindness more real. On the final page, a map appeared. It showed a path from the library through 3 circular rooms to the star chamber beneath the dark glass dome. At the center, an 8-pointed light pulsed once, the Amulet of Lumina. My heartbeat quickened. I placed both palms on the reading table and breathed until it slowed. brighten, soften, brighten, soften. The pattern of Lumenara remained within me. Before leaving, I looked once more at the shelves. So much memory waited there, more than I could carry and more than I needed tonight. I chose one small crystal leaf. Its surface held Seleni's message and the map to Dawnspire. When I lifted it, the library gave one low chime of permission. I wrapped the leaf in cloth and placed it beside the moonflower seed. Then I followed the path beyond the rain. The first circular room contained no furniture. Its walls were covered in polished black stone. When I entered, the amber lights went dark, and 100 reflections of Lyra entered with me. Some looked as I did now, mud-stained, tired, silver braid loosened, green armor scarred by the road. Others were different. One wore the full silver crown of Silverwood. One carried the dead branch of the great elder tree. One knelt beside a broken whisper wind. One stood before an empty city. They were not memories, they were fears. Every ending I had refused to imagine waited in the mirrors. The door behind me remained open. Ahead, another door stood across the room, closed. I could have crossed quickly, eyes lowered. Instead, I sat. The reflection sat with me. I looked first at the crowned Lyra. She seemed powerful and utterly alone. I had feared that saving Silverwood would bind me to a throne I had never asked for. "You may be," I told her, "but you are not tonight." Her image softened. I looked at the Lyra holding the dead branch. "The tree may not survive," I said, and the words hurt. "But love is not a bargain we make only with things that cannot be lost." Her branch put out one tiny leaf. I looked at the kneeling Lyra beside the broken sword. "Whisperwind is not my courage," I said. "It only reminds me where courage has lived before." The broken blade became still water. At last I faced the Lyra in the empty city. This was the fear beneath all others. That I would return too late. That no footsteps would sound in the eastern stair. No children would race bark boats through the rain. No time would grow beneath my window. I could not tell that reflection it would never happen. I could not promise what I did not know. So I placed my hand against the mirror. "If you are waiting for me in some future night," I whispered, "I will sit with you. You will not be alone." The empty city filled with moonlight. All the mirrors became clear. The door ahead opened. The second room was lined with pale wood. Hundreds of shallow drawers covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Each bore a name. I recognized none of them until I found one at eye level. Lyra of Silverwood. I pulled it open. Inside lay ordinary things: the scent of warm bread, the sound of my mother's lullaby, the weight of a moonflower seed, Tavin's muddy hands, my brother laughing when I first dropped Whisperwind during training, and the cool stone floor above the great elder tree's roots. No battle waited there, no counsel, no prophecy, only the small pieces from which a life is made. I did not take them. They were already mine. I closed the drawer gently. Other names brightened around it. Valor, Tavin, Meryl, my mother, my brother. People I loved, people who frustrated me, people who did not agree with me, people whose fears had wounded and protected them in equal measure. Silverwood was not a single story with me at its center. It was a room of countless drawers, each holding a world. As I understood this, the far wall folded aside. The third room was open to the sky. There were no walls, though I knew I remained deep inside Dawnspire. A circular floor of white stone floated beneath the stars. Lumenara wound far below, its turquoise light drawing a path through the dark forest. At the center grew a young tree. It was no taller than I was. Silver bark covered its narrow trunk. Its branches held 8 leaves, one for each point of the star. Beside it lay a clay pitcher. The tree's soil was dry. I poured water from my flask around its roots. The flask held only ordinary river water gathered before Elleren's Bend. When the last drop sank into the earth, the tree gave a long, quiet sigh. One leaf turned toward me, then another. Light moved through the veins of all 8. I waited for a hidden door to appear. None did. I walked to the edge of the platform. I studied the stars. I examined the pitcher and the tree. Still, there was no path. At last I sat beside the roots. Perhaps this room had no lesson beyond caring for what was thirsty. Perhaps the door would open in an hour, or by the next moon, or after the tree had grown for 100 years. I leaned my back against its slender trunk. The clay lamp glowed warmly at my belt. I thought of Elleren's seed beneath dark soil, doing what a seed must do where no one could watch. I thought of Lumenara pausing in quiet pools without ceasing to be a river. Then I stopped waiting for the room to reward me. I simply rested beside the tree. A soft touch brushed my shoulder. One silver leaf had fallen into my lap. Where it had been, a new bud already formed. I lifted the leaf. It was warm and almost weightless. Light ran from its stem to its point, then flowed into the white stone beneath me. A line appeared across the platform. The line became a stair. It descended toward a round chamber filled with stars. I placed the leaf at the tree's roots and stood. The star chamber waited below. The stair curved downward through darkness. No wall bordered it, no rail guided my hand. Yet stars floated on every side, close enough to touch. Some were tiny and blue, others burned amber, green, or silver. They moved slowly as I passed, turning around a center I could not yet see. With each step, the sounds of Dawnspire faded. The river bells disappeared first, then the wind, then even the soft rhythm of my boots upon the stone. I entered a silence so complete that I could hear my own breathing, as though it belonged to someone walking beside me. I did not fear it. I had known other silences, the hungry silence of Shadowfen, the defeated silence of the council, and the aching silence beneath the roots of the great elder tree. This was none of those. This silence felt like the moment before a song, when every note is possible and none has yet been chosen. The stair ended on the shore of a round, dark pool. Above it rose the glass dome I had seen from the river. The twin moons shone through the ancient panes, their light crossing in the center of the water. There, beneath the surface, rested an 8-pointed star, the Amulet of Lumina. It was smaller than I had imagined. The songs had made it seem like a second sun, a relic that would fill any room with unbearable radiance. Instead, it lay upon a bed of white sand, attached to a simple silver chain. Its center held one quiet point of gold. The glow brightened, softened, brightened, softened. It breathed with the same rhythm as Lumenara. I knelt at the edge of the pool. For a long while I did nothing. No guardian emerged, no voice challenged me, no shadow crossed the dome. The amulet simply waited within clear water. I removed my gloves and set them beside Whisperwind. Then I reached into the pool. The water was warm. My fingers closed around the star. At once, light moved up my arm. I saw a forest before Silverwood had a name. Rain fell through enormous leaves. Deer followed paths that would one day become streets. Rivers crossed clearings where palaces would rise. At the forest's center grew a young tree, silver-barked and no taller than the one in the room above. A star crossed the sky. It did not strike the earth with fire. It descended like a seed and came to rest among the tree's roots. The roots curled around it. The tree grew. Years passed in a breath. Its branches widened. Elves made their homes beneath them. They learned songs from the wind and healing from the bark. The star's light traveled through root, leaf, water, and hand. No amulet existed then. There was only a gift shared among living things. Much later, when fire swept the western forest, the first keepers shaped a tiny fragment of the fallen star into the 8-pointed jewel. They did not make its power. They gave the power a vessel so it could be carried where roots did not reach. I saw it heal burned groves. I saw it awaken seeds after drought. I saw it pass from hand to hand, never owned and never crowned. Then I saw kings who wanted to hold it forever. I saw healers who gave too much of their own life through it. I saw grateful villages build thrones for those who carried it. Slowly, a gift became a symbol of command. At last, Selenai fled with it beneath her cloak while the hollow court followed. She reached Dawnspire and placed the amulet in this pool. "Rest," she whispered to it. The star went dark, but not entirely. One small point of gold remained, waiting. The vision released me. I was again kneeling beneath the glass dome, one hand in the warm pool. The amulet rested in my palm. Its light passed into the wound at my side. I felt no sudden blaze, only a warmth like Elleren's fire. The torn skin eased. The pain that had followed me from the marshfang became distant, then quieter still. The amulet could have closed the wound completely. I knew this as certainly as I knew my own name. Yet it waited for my permission. "Enough," I whispered. The light stopped. My wound remained tender. It would need clean bandages, rest, and time. That no longer felt like failure. The amulet had reminded my body of the way toward wholeness. My body would make the journey. I lifted the chain from the water. The 8-pointed star lay against my bare palm. I had found it. After the council chamber, the long road, the marshfang, the hidden parchment, the serpent's coil, and every quiet mile of Lumenara, the Amulet of Lumina was here. No triumphant music rose beneath the dome. No ancient voice named me its chosen bearer. I felt only gratitude, deep and still. "I will take you to Silverwood," I said. "Not to command the great elder tree, not to force spring into every branch. I will ask you to help us listen." The gold center brightened. The stars around the chamber began to move. They formed an image above the pool, the great elder tree beneath eternal twilight. Its outer limbs were bare, its trunk was scarred, yet far below, among the deepest roots, small points of green light remained. Life remained. Not much, but enough to remember. Tears blurred the image. I did not wipe them away. For so long I had forbidden myself to grieve. Grief seemed too close to surrender, and surrender was the one thing I had sworn never to accept. But grief was not surrender. It was love making room for uncertainty. I let the tears fall into the pool. Where each touched the water, a small circle of gold spread outward. The image of the elder tree remained. At its roots, the green lights pulsed 3 times, then rested. 3 times, then rested. The same heart from my dream. I lowered the silver chain over my head. The Amulet of Lumina came to rest beneath my armor, close to my heart. Its warmth was present but gentle. It did not make me stronger than I had been. It did not erase fear. It did not fill my hands with impossible power. It made the living world easier to hear. Far above, roots pressed through cracks in Dawnspire's stone. I heard water rise within them. Moss drank mist from the riverbank. Moths stirred beneath leaves. The moonflower in Elrond's garden opened one pale petal. Farther still, beyond marsh and ridge, the great elder tree rested beneath Silverwood. I could not hear its song, not yet, but I could feel the place where a song might begin. That was enough for this night. I gathered my gloves and whisperwind. Before leaving the pool, I turned back to the bed of white sand where the amulet had waited. In the hollow it left behind lay a tiny silver seed. I picked it up and held it between 2 fingers. The amulet warmed against my chest. Not everything found was meant to be taken away. I returned the seed to the sand. Perhaps another keeper would need it. Perhaps it would grow beneath the water. Perhaps some hopes were safest when left for the future. The stars parted, revealing the stair. I began the slow walk upward. The young silver tree waited at the top of the stair. Its 8 leaves had opened wide. The 9th was still a curled bud, luminous at the edges. I touched the trunk in thanks. The tree answered with 3 soft pulses beneath my palm. Around the platform, the false night sky faded, and Dawnspire's white stone walls returned. The rooms of remembering were quiet now. The mirrors reflected only my present face. The drawers of memory remained closed. The impossible rain whispered in the library. I carried Selenai's crystal leaf back to the central table. For a moment, I considered taking it to Silverwood as proof. The council would want records. Scholars would ask how the amulet had vanished, how Dawnspire had survived, and what Selenai had done. Then the leaf warmed in my hand. Its message appeared once more. Lumina does not pour life into empty things. It awakens the life that remains. I had already remembered the words. The leaf belonged to the library. I set it on the final page of Selenai's book. It dissolved into one bright drop and rose to join the rain. Somewhere among the shelves a chime sounded. When I stepped into the outer courtyard, the smaller moon had begun to lower behind the hills. The doorway closed after me, slowly and without finality. The silver branches folded around the star. I knew now that a song, not a key, would open them again. I crossed Dawnspire without following the path of light. I did not need it. The city had become familiar in the quiet way of a place visited in a meaningful dream. I passed the dry fountains, the moonlit hall, and the balcony where vines grew through the stone rail. Near the river stairs, I found a small chamber with an intact roof. It had once been a keeper's room. A narrow bed stood against one wall. A round window looked toward Lumenara. Folded blankets rested inside a cedar chest, carrying the faint scent of lavender despite the centuries. My boat still waited among the reeds. The way home was open. But Alarin had been right. The great elder tree had waited through many seasons. The Amulet of Lumina had waited through many centuries. One night of rest would not betray them. I unfastened my armor. First the silver pauldrons, then the leather guards, then the belt that carried parchment lamp and sword. I placed Whisperwind beside the bed. Its runes glowed once in greeting to the amulet, then faded. The last moonflower seed remained safe in my satchel, one for home. I washed with water from a stone basin. I changed the bandage around my side. The wound had begun to close, not with the smooth perfection of a spell, but with the honest work of a living body. I pulled the blue and green blanket from the chest and lay beneath it. Through the round window I could see the river's glowing curve. Mist drifted above the surface, willow branches moved in the breeze, the twin moons rested over the distant trees. I thought of the road back to Silverwood. There would be difficult miles. Shadowfen had not lost all its darkness. The council might not welcome the truth I carried. The great elder tree might awaken slowly, and some branches might never leaf again. All of that belonged to another day. Tonight, the amulet was safe. Tonight, Silverwood still held green light in its deepest roots. Tonight, I did not have to solve the whole future. I placed one hand over the 8-pointed star beneath my tunic. Brighten. Soften. Brighten. Soften. My breathing followed. Beyond the window, the river followed. Somewhere far downstream, bells beneath the bridge gave one quiet note and then another. Call and answer. Memory and dream. Siren and Ale keeping watch over the narrow silver path between them. I remembered time beneath my window, warm bread near the eastern stair, children laughing over bark boats in the rain, my mother's song, Tavin's moonflower seeds, Elaren's fire, the reed boat carrying me without hurry, the great elder tree's resting heart, 3 beats, then stillness, 3 beats, then stillness. For the first time since beginning my quest, I did not dream of arriving too late. I dreamed of roots drinking rain. I dreamed of a small seed opening beneath dark soil where no one watched. I dreamed of a river that did not become lost when it slowed. And I slept.